In January 2025, the U.S. government published two reports about Havana Syndrome on the same day. The first, from the National Intelligence Council, concluded that it was very unlikely that a foreign actor had used a weapon to harm American personnel. The second, from the House Intelligence Committee, concluded that a foreign adversary was increasingly likely responsible. Same evidence, same government, same day, opposite conclusions. We want to hold that contradiction clearly before we go any further, because the question of which report is correct is not just an academic question. There are more than 1,000 people who reported symptoms. Some of them can no longer work. Some retired early. Some say they can't find words the way they used to. And the government that is supposed to protect them cannot agree in a single day on whether they were attacked or not. We found something that might explain why. Beginning in late 2016, American diplomats and intelligence officers stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba, began reporting something they had never experienced before. A sound, high-pitched, directional, seeming to come from a specific point in a room or outside a window. Not ambient noise, something localized and deliberate. And then following the sound, dizziness, nausea, pressure in the ears, cognitive difficulties, balance problems that persisted after the sound had stopped. The symptoms were not brief. People who reported them described problems that lasted for weeks, months, in some cases years. Some embassy staff were medically evacuated to the United States. Some never returned to full capacity. Some retired on medical grounds. The State Department took the reports seriously. The U.S. expelled Cuban diplomats. Canada, whose diplomatic staff had reported similar symptoms, reduced its Havana embassy presence. The phenomenon was called Havana Syndrome. It spread, or similar reports began arriving from other locations, from China, from Vienna, from Moscow, from India, from Washington, D.C., including reportedly from an area near the White House. More than 1,000 government employees and their family members eventually filed claims. The question of what had happened to them became one of the most politically sensitive medical and intelligence questions the U.S. government had faced in decades. Multiple investigations were launched. The FBI investigated. The CIA investigated. The State Department commissioned research. The National Institutes of Health conducted medical studies. An independent panel of experts was assembled by the intelligence community. The classified Jason Advisory Group, the scientific panel that advises the Department of Defense on advanced threats, reviewed the evidence. Their findings did not align. The NIH studies, published in March 2024, found no unusual pattern of brain damage in people who had reported Havana Syndrome symptoms. Brain scans showed no significant differences between affected personnel and control groups. The lead researcher told reporters that they had not found evidence of a specific injury pattern that would indicate a directed external attack. The Jason panel found something different. Their classified report, portions of which became public, concluded that the symptoms were most consistent with exposure to pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy. In other words, with a directed energy weapon of some kind. In 2023, 5 U.S. intelligence agencies jointly assessed that it was highly unlikely Havana Syndrome was the result of a foreign attack, and that there was no credible evidence a weapon capable of causing the symptoms even existed. In January 2025, the National Intelligence Council updated this assessment. Very unlikely that a foreign actor was responsible. Also in January 2025, the House Intelligence Committee issued its own report. A foreign adversary was increasingly likely responsible. These are not minor differences in emphasis. They are contradictory conclusions issued by different parts of the same government on the basis of overlapping but not identical access to the same underlying evidence. Something is driving that contradiction. We want to show you what we think it is. In 1961, a biophysicist named Alan Frey published a paper that changed, quietly, and with very little public attention, what the military establishment understood about the human nervous system. Frey discovered that microwave radiation at specific frequencies and pulse rates could generate auditory sensations in human beings, not through the normal mechanism of sound waves vibrating the eardrum. Directly in the auditory cortex, the brain perceived sounds that had no acoustic source. The effect is real. It has been replicated. It is in the peer-reviewed literature under multiple names. The Frey effect, microwave auditory effect, radio frequency hearing. The military implications were recognized immediately. The U.S. Army funded research into it. The Soviet Union funded research into it. The phenomenon became part of the classified research landscape of both superpowers almost as soon as it was published. A weapon built on the Frey effect would have specific characteristics. It would produce auditory sensations, perceived sounds, in a target. It would be directional. It could be aimed at a specific person or a specific room. It would leave no visible trace. And depending on the intensity and duration of exposure, it could produce neurological effects beyond simple auditory hallucination, dizziness, nausea, cognitive disruption, through the same mechanism by which intense acoustic stimulation causes inner ear damage and vestibular dysfunction. This is a description of something that could cause every symptom that has been reported by Havana Syndrome victims. The Jason panel's conclusion, pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy, is a description of a weapon that operates on the Frey effect. The Jason panel is the classified scientific advisory group to the Department of Defense. They do not reach conclusions carelessly. In March 2024, a joint investigation by 60 Minutes, Der Spiegel, and The Insider published findings about a specific unit of Russian military intelligence. GRU Unit 29155 is a covert operations unit within the Russian Military Intelligence Directorate. It has been linked by Western intelligence services and investigative journalists to a series of high-profile foreign operations, including the 2018 Salisbury poisoning of former Russian intelligence officer Sergei Skripal and his daughter. The unit operates outside normal military chains of command. Its members are selected for foreign operations that require deniability. Its existence was not publicly acknowledged by Russia until its activities became too documented to deny. The 2024 investigation found that members of GRU Unit 29155 had received promotions, awards, and commendations for work specifically described in the internal documentation that the journalists obtained as relating to the development and deployment of non-lethal acoustic weaponry. The timeline of those awards overlaps with the timeline of the first Havana incidents. The journalists who published this investigation were not fringe reporters. 60 Minutes is the longest-running investigative news program in American television history. Der Spiegel is one of Europe's most respected investigative outlets. The Insider has documented GRU operations across multiple countries with a track record that has been independently verified. What they found is not proof. It is not a smoking gun. It is evidence of a specific Russian military unit receiving specific recognition for specific work in a specific time window that is consistent with the development of a capability that would explain what happened in Havana. The U.S. intelligence community's response to this investigation, the January 2025 report, concluding that foreign involvement was very unlikely. The House Intelligence Committee's response, the January 2025 report, concluding that foreign involvement was increasingly likely. Before we continue with what the documents say, we want to talk about the people. Mark Polymeropoulos spent 26 years with the CIA. He ran operations in some of the most difficult environments in the world. In December 2017, he was in Moscow. He woke up in the middle of the night with a severe vertigo attack. The symptoms did not resolve. He developed chronic migraines that affected his ability to work and eventually his ability to continue in his career. He retired in 2019. He has spoken publicly about what happened to him because, he has said, he believes the people who sent him to Moscow knew the risk and did not adequately disclose it. He is one person. There are more than 1,000 claims on file. We do not know exactly how many of those claims represent genuine exposure to a directed energy weapon, how many represent other medical conditions that were misattributed, and how many represent what some researchers have described as a mass psychogenic illness, in which the power of suggestion and shared expectation produced real symptoms without an external physical cause. We are not dismissing that possibility. It is real. Mass psychogenic illness is a documented phenomenon. It has been observed in other high-stress, high-information control environments where people believe they have been exposed to a threat. But we want to note something about the mass psychogenic illness explanation. It requires that the first cases, the initial cluster in Havana, also be psychogenic. It requires that the original trigger was not an external phenomenon, but an internal one. And it requires that the Jason panel's conclusion, pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy, be wrong. The Jason panel has been advising the Department of Defense on advanced threats since 1960. They are, by the structure of their mandate, exactly the kind of body whose job is to distinguish between real and imagined threats. They concluded pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy. We are not saying that conclusion is correct. We are saying it is very difficult to explain why a body with that track record and that mandate would produce that conclusion if the evidence did not support it. The Vienna incidents deserve specific attention. In 2021, it became public that an unusually high number of CIA personnel stationed in Vienna had reported Havana Syndrome symptoms. Vienna was, at that time, one of the most active intelligence environments in Europe, a city where Russian, American, Chinese, Iranian, and multiple other intelligence services operate in close proximity. The CIA station chief in Vienna was removed from her post. The official explanation was that she had not adequately supported personnel who had reported symptoms, that she had failed to take their concerns seriously. This is an unusual step. Removing a station chief is a significant action. It signals that the agency viewed the complaints as legitimate enough that failing to act on them constituted a dereliction of duty. And yet, within months of that removal, the institutional position of the intelligence community began moving toward the very unlikely foreign involvement conclusion. We are not claiming these events are directly connected. We are noting that they happened in sequence. A station chief is removed for not taking symptoms seriously. The institution then produces reports saying the symptoms were probably not caused by a foreign weapon. The people who reported the symptoms say those reports do not reflect their experience. Something in that sequence does not resolve neatly. We want to be precise about what we are and are not saying. We are not saying Havana Syndrome was definitively caused by a Russian directed energy weapon. We are not saying the intelligence community is lying about its conclusions. We are not saying that every person who filed a claim was targeted by a foreign actor. What we are saying is this: the Frey effect, the ability to generate auditory sensations in a human being using pulsed microwave radiation, has been documented since 1961. The Jason panel concluded that the Havana Syndrome symptoms were consistent with pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy. A joint investigation by 3 major news organizations found that GRU Unit 29155 received awards for developing a non-lethal acoustic weapon in a time window that overlaps with the Havana incidents. The U.S. government published 2 reports on the same day, reaching opposite conclusions. and more than 1,000 people, many of them career intelligence and diplomatic professionals, reported symptoms that, in some cases, ended their careers. We are laying out what we found. Two things can be true simultaneously. The U.S. government may have institutional and geopolitical reasons not to publicly confirm that a foreign adversary successfully attacked American personnel on American soil and in American embassies abroad. Confirming that would require a response. A response would require decisions that the government may not be positioned to make. And the people who reported symptoms, whatever caused them, may be telling the truth about what they experienced. We are not resolving this for you. We are saying, read both reports. Read the 60 Minutes investigation. Read what the Jason panel concluded, and then ask yourself why two parts of the same government, looking at the same evidence, reached opposite conclusions on the same day. The U.S. government's official position, as of early 2025, is that Havana Syndrome was very likely not caused by a foreign weapon. The House Intelligence Committee's position is the opposite. The GRU Unit 29155 investigation found evidence consistent with the development of a weapon that could cause the reported symptoms. The Jason panel found that the symptoms were consistent with pulsed electromagnetic or acoustic energy, and more than 1,000 people are still waiting for an answer. We're laying out what we found. You decide what it means. If you know something we don't, you know where to find us. Subscribe, share this, and leave a comment. Because the question isn't just what happened in Havana, it's what is happening now. In the embassies, the hotels, the government buildings where American personnel work, and whether the weapon, if it exists, has been used since.